How much is this?
I don't think this would fit you.
Well, I didn't ask if it would fit. I asked how much it was.
How much is this, Marie?
It's very expensive.
Some movies become classics, others become cultural phenomena that audiences revisit for generations. Pretty Woman is one of those rare films. Released in 1990, it turned Julia Roberts into a Hollywood superstar, revived Roy Orbison's iconic hit, and became one of the most beloved romantic comedies ever made. But behind its fairy tale romance lies a very different story. What if the movie was originally written as a dark drama? And what if several major stars turned down the lead role? Today, we're counting down 13 weird facts about Pretty Woman that reveal just how close this Hollywood classic came to becoming a completely different movie. 13. Rodeo Drive's snobbery was inspired by reality. One of the film's most satisfying moments comes when Vivian returns to Rodeo Drive carrying armfuls of shopping bags and confidently tells the saleswomen they made a big mistake. It's an unforgettable scene because viewers have already watched her endure humiliating treatment simply because of how she looked. As it turns out, that attitude wasn't entirely fictional. When the production sought permission to film along the real Rodeo Drive, several luxury boutiques reportedly hesitated to participate. Many high-end retailers didn't want their brands associated with a story centered on a sex worker, even though the screenplay had already evolved into a romantic comedy. Some stores declined involvement altogether, forcing the filmmakers to work with businesses that were more willing to cooperate. Ironically, the hesitation only strengthened the authenticity of Vivian's shopping experience. The dismissive attitudes portrayed in the movie reflected perceptions that already existed in some upscale shopping districts, making the eventual comeback feel even more rewarding. After Pretty Woman became a worldwide hit, everything changed. Rodeo Drive embraced its connection to the film, and visitors from around the world began recreating Vivian's famous shopping scene. What started as an obstacle during production ultimately became one of the street's biggest tourist attractions, proving that sometimes rejection can create an even better story. But Rodeo Drive wasn't the only part of Pretty Woman that changed because of unexpected reactions. Believe it or not, the film itself almost ended in a completely different way. And if the filmmakers hadn't listened to early audiences, this beloved classic might have been remembered very differently. 12. Test audiences changed the ending forever. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine Pretty Woman ending any other way than Edward climbing the fire escape with flowers in hand. But that ending nearly never happened. Early versions of the film concluded on a much quieter and far less romantic note. After Edward paid Vivian, the two simply went their separate ways. There was no dramatic reunion, no grand declaration of love, and no fairy tale finale to reward viewers who had spent 2 hours watching their relationship develop. When preview audiences saw that version, the response was overwhelmingly negative. Many felt emotionally invested in the characters and expected a conclusion that reflected the romance the story had gradually built. Instead, the original ending felt abrupt and emotionally incomplete. The feedback convinced the filmmakers to rethink the final act. Director Gary Marshall and the studio arranged additional filming to create a brand new ending centered on Edward overcoming his fears and making one final effort to win Vivian back. The now iconic fire escape sequence was added during these reshoots, instantly transforming the film's emotional impact. That decision helped define Pretty Woman as a modern fairy tale rather than a realistic drama. Without those audience reactions, one of romantic comedy's most memorable endings might never have existed. Changing the ending solved one major problem, but another challenge had already existed long before filming began. The actress we now associate with Vivian wasn't the studio's first choice, and several Hollywood stars had the opportunity to play the role before Julia Roberts. 11. Julia Roberts wasn't the original choice. Today, Julia Roberts and Vivian Ward are practically inseparable in movie history. Surprisingly, she wasn't the first actress considered for the role. During development, several well-known actresses were approached, including Molly Ringwald, Michelle Pfeiffer, Meg Ryan, and Daryl Hannah. Some declined because of scheduling conflicts, while others were uncomfortable with the darker tone of the original screenplay, which portrayed Vivian's world far more realistically than the final version audiences eventually saw. At that stage, the project wasn't the charming romantic comedy people recognized. recognize today. It leaned heavily into drama, making the lead character far more tragic and emotionally damaged. As the screenplay evolved, so did the vision for Vivian. The filmmakers began searching for someone who could balance humor, vulnerability, confidence, and warmth, all qualities that Julia Roberts naturally brought to the role. Her infectious smile, spontaneous energy, and emotional sincerity gave Vivian a likability that softened the story without removing its emotional core. Once Roberts joined the production, many scenes were adjusted to better fit her personality and performance style. The dialogue became lighter, the romance became more believable, and the chemistry between the leads elevated nearly every scene they shared. Looking back, it's difficult to picture anyone else playing Vivian. What began as one of Hollywood's many casting uncertainties ultimately became one of its greatest success stories. It's difficult to imagine anyone else bringing Vivian to life, but she wasn't the only future star who nearly passed on this project. The actor who became Edward Lewis had serious doubts as well, and his decision almost changed the movie forever. 10. Richard Gere almost passed on the film. Richard Gere made Edward Lewis look effortlessly confident, but accepting the role wasn't an easy decision. By the late 1980s, Gere had reached a point where he was questioning the direction of his acting career. Some recent projects hadn't achieved the success he hoped for, and he wasn't immediately convinced that another romance about a wealthy businessman would offer anything new. Initially, Edward appeared to be a straightforward corporate executive whose life revolved around business deals and financial success. However, director Gary Marshall saw something deeper in the character. Rather than focusing on Edward's wealth, Marshall encouraged Gere to explore the emotional walls surrounding him, a man who had spent years prioritizing business over meaningful relationships until Vivian challenged everything he believed. That emotional journey convinced Gere to reconsider. His growing chemistry with Julia Roberts during rehearsals further reinforced the decision, and together they developed one of the most memorable romantic pairings of the decade. The gamble paid off. Pretty Woman became one of Gere's biggest career successes, re-establishing him as one of Hollywood's leading romantic actors and introducing audiences to a character whose emotional transformation proved just as compelling as Vivian's own journey. Fortunately for audiences, Richard Gere changed his mind, but even after the cast was finalized, the filmmakers still had clever ways of telling their story, sometimes through details most viewers never even noticed. One elegant scene quietly reveals far more than it first appears. 9. The opera scene quietly mirrors their love story. The elegant opera sequence isn't just there to showcase Edward's luxurious lifestyle. It also serves as one of the film's smartest storytelling devices. The production deliberately chose an opera whose themes closely reflect Vivian and Edward's relationship. As Vivian watches the performance, she's drawn into the emotional story unfolding on stage, a woman stepping into a world she never imagined she could belong to. Her emotional reaction isn't simply about the music. For perhaps the first time, Vivian begins seeing herself as someone worthy of love, rather than someone defined by her past. At the same time, Edward spends much of the evening watching Vivian instead of the performance, realizing how profoundly she has changed his perspective on life. The opera becomes more than an expensive date. It quietly reinforces the fairy tale direction the film has embraced, allowing both characters to recognize that their unlikely romance is becoming something genuine. It's a subtle but powerful reminder that Pretty Woman isn't only telling a love story, it's inviting viewers to believe in second chances. Once you notice that hidden storytelling choice, the entire sequence feels even more meaningful. But the next unforgettable moment wasn't carefully planned at all. In fact, one of the movie's most iconic scenes happened because of a completely spontaneous surprise. 8. Two iconic moments happened, almost by accident. Few images from Pretty Woman are as recognizable as Vivian wearing the elegant red evening gown and dazzling diamond necklace. Although the final look feels inevitable today, costume designers explored several different wardrobe concepts before deciding on the bold red dress. Softer colors were considered, but they lacked the dramatic impact the filmmakers wanted. The rich crimson gown immediately transformed Vivian's appearance while symbolizing her growing confidence. Then came another unforgettable scene that wasn't planned at all. During the jewelry presentation, Richard Gere suddenly snapped the necklace box shut just as Julia Roberts reached toward it. The unexpected prank startled her, causing Roberts to burst into genuine laughter. That reaction wasn't scripted. Director Gary Marshall loved the spontaneous moment so much that he kept it in the final cut. Rather than filming another polished take, He chose authenticity over perfection. Decades later, that brief laugh remains one of the movie's most beloved moments, proving that sometimes the best scenes happen when actors simply react naturally. Sometimes the moments audiences remember most aren't scripted, they simply happen in front of the camera. And that wasn't the only genuine reaction the filmmakers captured. Julia Roberts delivered another unforgettable moment thanks to an unusual trick behind the scenes. 7. Julia Roberts' famous laugh was completely real. Julia Roberts' unforgettable laugh became one of Pretty Woman's signature qualities, helping make Vivian feel warm, energetic, and genuine. One particular scene, however, required a little unexpected help. While filming the sequence where Vivian laughs uncontrollably as she watches television, director Gary Marshall wanted something far more natural than the typical Hollywood laugh. Instead of asking Roberts to fake it repeatedly, he quietly stepped behind the camera and began tickling her feet between takes. The result was immediate. Roberts erupted into uncontrollable laughter, unable to hide her reaction. Since the emotion was completely authentic, Marshall decided to leave it exactly as it happened. That spontaneous moment added another layer of charm to Vivian's personality. Instead of feeling rehearsed, her laughter reflected genuine joy, making audiences feel as though they were watching a real person rather than a carefully constructed movie character. Sometimes, the smallest behind-the-scenes decisions create the most memorable moments on screen. Those genuine laughs helped make Vivian feel incredibly real. But she wasn't the only character whose personality evolved during production. One supporting role quietly became one of the film's emotional foundations, even though that was never the original intention. 6. Barney was never supposed to become Vivian's biggest ally. When Vivian first enters the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, viewers expect manager Barney Thompson to become another obstacle standing in her way. Instead, he becomes one of her strongest supporters. That wasn't always the original plan. Early versions of the character presented Barney as a stricter hotel manager whose primary concern was protecting the hotel's prestigious reputation. But once veteran actor Hector Elizondo joined the production, director Gary Marshall recognized that his natural warmth brought something far more meaningful to the role. Rather than judging Vivian, Barney treats her with dignity, quietly guiding her through unfamiliar situations without making her feel embarrassed. He teaches her proper etiquette, arranges assistance when she needs it, and offers kindness at moments when nearly everyone else dismisses her. His compassionate performance transformed Barney into the film's quiet moral center. The character may not wear a fairy godmother's wand, but throughout the story, he opens doors, offers encouragement, and reminds viewers that genuine respect often comes from the most unexpected people. Without Barney's kindness, Vivian's transformation wouldn't have felt nearly as believable. Another important ingredient also helped define the movie's identity, and it wasn't a character at all. It was a song that audiences still associate with the film decades later. 5. Roy Orbison's classic song found a new generation. Long before Pretty Woman reached theaters, Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman was already one of rock music's biggest hits. But the film introduced the song to an entirely new generation. The opening guitar riff immediately became inseparable from the movie, helping establish its playful, romantic tone within seconds. Instead of simply using the song as background music, the filmmakers made it part of the film's identity. Following the movie's enormous success, the classic track experienced a remarkable resurgence. Radio stations played it more frequently, soundtrack albums sold strongly, and younger audiences who had never heard Orbison's original recording suddenly associated it with Vivian's unforgettable walk through Hollywood. More than 3 decades later, it's difficult to hear the song without immediately thinking of Pretty Woman. That's the mark of perfect musical storytelling. That unforgettable guitar riff became almost as famous as the movie itself. But while Roy Orbison's music enjoyed a second life, one actress saw her entire career transformed overnight because of this remarkable film. 4. Pretty Woman made Julia Roberts a superstar. Julia Roberts had already appeared in several films before Pretty Woman, but this was the role that transformed her career forever. Vivian demanded far more than simply delivering romantic dialogue. Roberts had to balance humor, heartbreak, confidence, vulnerability, and emotional growth, often within the same scene. Audiences instantly connected with her natural charisma. She made Vivian feel authentic despite the fairy tale premise, allowing viewers to root for her from beginning to end. Hollywood quickly noticed. Following the film's phenomenal success, Roberts became one of the industry's industry's most sought-after actresses, studios began developing projects specifically with her in mind, recognizing that audiences were just as eager to watch Julia Roberts as they were the stories themselves. The film didn't simply create a memorable character, it launched one of Hollywood's biggest stars and helped define the romantic comedy genre throughout the 1990s. Julia Roberts had officially become Hollywood's newest leading lady, but she wasn't the only reason audiences kept returning to theaters. Her remarkable chemistry with Richard Gere became one of the film's greatest strengths, and it even led to another unforgettable reunion years later. 3. The film's success reunited Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. One of the biggest reasons Pretty Woman remains so beloved is the undeniable chemistry between Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. Their performances made Edward and Vivian feel believable, even within an unlikely fairy tale romance. Audiences embraced the pairing, returning to theaters and repeatedly renting the film throughout the 1990s. Although some critics questioned the movie's idealized portrayal of wealth and romance, viewers couldn't get enough of its two stars together. That popularity eventually led to another collaboration. Nearly a decade later, Roberts and Gere reunited for Runaway Bride, once again directed by Gary Marshall. Even before production began, many fans were excited simply because the two leads would be sharing the screen again. The reunion proved that the magic audiences experienced in Pretty Woman wasn't just about the story, it was about the remarkable connection between its stars, a partnership that became one of the defining screen pairings of its era. Their partnership became one of the most beloved screen pairings of the decade. But here's the biggest surprise: none of it was supposed to happen this way. The movie itself began as something much darker than anyone would ever expect. 2. The original script was far darker than the film. It's hard to imagine today, but Pretty Woman almost became a completely different movie. The earlier screenplay was titled 3000, referring to the amount Edward paid Vivian for their arrangement. Unlike the charming romantic comedy audiences know today, the original script was a bleak drama exploring prostitution, loneliness, and emotional isolation. Vivian was written as a troubled woman battling addiction, while Edward was portrayed as emotionally cold and far less sympathetic. Their relationship wasn't intended to become a love story, and the original ending offered little hope for either character. When Disney's Touchstone Pictures acquired the project, executives believed audiences would connect more deeply with an uplifting romance than a tragic cautionary tale. Several rewrites followed. The darker elements were removed, humor was added, the characters became more compassionate, and director Gary Marshall embraced the idea of creating a modern fairy tale. That creative decision completely changed the film's future, turning what could have been a forgotten drama into one of Hollywood's most enduring romantic classics. 1. A last-minute transformation created a timeless classic. The weirdest fact of all is that Pretty Woman almost became a completely different movie. Nearly every defining element of the film, the lighter tone, the unforgettable ending, Julia Roberts' performance, Richard Gere's emotional character arc, and even several iconic scenes resulted from creative decisions made during production rather than the original script. Instead of telling a harsh story about two damaged people, the filmmakers chose hope over despair, romance over cynicism, and emotional growth over tragedy. That gamble paid off beyond anyone's expectations. Released in 1990, Pretty Woman became a worldwide box office phenomenon, earned Julia Roberts an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, and remains one of the most beloved romantic comedies ever made. Its legacy proves that sometimes the best films aren't the ones that follow the original plan, they're the ones willing to reinvent themselves along the way. Looking back, it's amazing how many risks, rewrites, and unexpected decisions shaped the final film. Had just one of those choices gone differently, Pretty Woman might never have become the romantic comedy audiences still celebrate more than 3 decades later. And that's what makes its real-life journey just as unforgettable as the movie itself. More than 3 decades later, Pretty Woman continues to captivate audiences with its unforgettable performances, iconic soundtrack, and timeless charm. But as you've seen, behind every memorable scene is a surprising behind-the-scenes story that almost changed the movie forever. So, which of these weird facts surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this countdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more behind-the-scenes stories from Hollywood's greatest classics. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.